Welcome to Pario magazine, where I chat with individuals who have a desire to create. Today, I'm joined by a professional wrestling journalist and podcaster. Welcome to Pario magazine, Kate Elizabeth from Fightful.
Thank you so much, Jamie. So happy to be here.
My pleasure to have you here. We're here today to chat about your journey through the world of pro wrestling media coverage. Before we dive into that, though, do you want to tell our audience who Kate is away from wrestling?
Oh my gosh, I have to ask myself that on a continual basis because wrestling has gotten so insane. But I live in the Northeast of the United States, and I've been in love with sports and music and wrestling pretty much my entire life, as far as I can remember. And it's kind of fun that I ended up in the wrestling media side of things because that's kind of a blend of a sport and an art form. So it was almost like inevitable I would end up here, but graduated in communication. So I've also always been tied to radio, which was before podcasting for anybody that remembers radio out there. And had my own business at certain points, worked in a lot of different environments, worked in live events a lot. So other than that, I'm just like chilling with my dog most days and yelling at the Yankees for being bad and injured all the time, and enjoying things on the East Coast, man. Can't complain. Life's all right.
Very nice. So I guess there are two facets to your journey so far. Most importantly, and first and foremost, which came first, wrestling or journalism and podcasting? Which of those passions?
Man, it's so crazy because the podcasting side and wrestling podcasting were very much tied into one, but through my entire adolescence into college, I'd always been interested in communications and radio. When I was 14, a huge New York Yankees fan, always obsessed with baseball. I really wanted to be a sports broadcaster. That was like what I was going to college for. All the college curriculums that I looked into were based off of that. I ended up majoring in public relations because it was just a little bit more suited for what all my strengths are. But I was at our radio station while I was there. WSOU was a hard rock and metal station. It was a top 10 university radio station, won a bunch of awards. And that was kind of like my foray into the radio side. But my career took off into the publicity side. And then the first podcasting I ever really did was through my friends who have a podcast called The Shining Wizards. And I just did some guest appearances on there. And then, like so many people during the pandemic, when AEW really first started to come to rise, we thought, what if we did like an offshoot more consistently that was an AEW post show to kind of give some love to this new wrestling brand at that point that had only been around 6 months before the pandemic hit. And that was really where it kind of started. And then very quickly from there evolved into my work at Fightful. And now I do this 6 days a week. So
You're very busy.
I am. I'm a busy gal, but I like it that way for sure. For sure.
I guess with the sort of radio background, the transition into podcasting kind of was relatively smooth and made a lot of sense for you.
It did. There was kind of just a gap between where I had left radio and picked up podcasting. But it did always feel like something that I loved and came a little bit more naturally to me. It was never anything that I planned on, but it was always something that was in my periphery in a sense. And also, honestly, so much of, I feel like my podcasting, not to pat myself on the back, but like my podcasting success almost came from having an entrepreneurial spirit in my own business too, because I think in addition to hosting and co-hosting so many shows, I'm always thinking in terms of bigger picture stuff because I was at the end of the day responsible for my own business. So making Sean Ross Sapp's life easier on the Fightful side of how can I contribute in ways from pre-production and post-production and setting things up and coordinating with other people, like that side being ingrained in me. I think the radio stuff lent itself very naturally, but I think the part that people maybe miss the most is how little just the on-air piece of it is and how much more maintenance is required outside of that role for keeping things moving from an operational perspective, and also trying to put forward new content and exciting content and make things better, make processes better. So I think my personality traits and my experience in radio and business just kind of all folded really nicely into it.
That's a common theme that comes up when I'm talking to creators about it's not necessarily the actual content that you're putting out that's the most work. It's all of that other background stuff that not everybody gets to see.
100%, 100%. And um, it's part of why I'm so. I have all the stuff I do at Fightful, and then I have my own channel, and I'm just not someone that is ever good at like outside of the commitments I have, because knock on wood, I have a lot of them with Fightful. My own schedule gets kind of sporadic when tending to my own stuff. I'm so jealous of people that have like their content creation calendars. Like, I'm not built that way outside of the stuff that I'm almost defaulting to. It's something I want to get better at. But I think when people kind of look at leaders in certain spaces with content creation of any sort, really, they think about just the on-air part or just the product and not the several processes and the cooperative pieces that go into it. I'm not surprised that's been a common theme, because I feel like that's consistent across any type of creation that you're doing, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, it's that promotion part is probably the biggest part of you got to get the word out there about it. You can't just put it out and assume people will come and find it. You have to get out there and put it in front of people's eyes so that they actually check it out.
Sure. And what does that mean, right? Is it cross promoting with other people? Is it posting it on social media? Like, what works for you? I'm lucky enough that at Fightful I get to ride everybody else's coattails. I say that as a loving joke all the time. I work my ass off, but like, our success is predicated on Sean. And I jumped in at a time where things were really thriving on that front. So I'm very lucky in that regard. But yeah, promotion, actually getting people to sit and listen to it, coming up with ideas that are differentiated in a very saturated space as wrestling media is right now, because there's so much wrestling on. Is there's a lot that goes into it that is so much more than what happens when you press start and stop, for sure.
And how much did your PR background help with that when you did join Fightful?
I think because so much of public relations is relationship building, it actually helped a lot. And I think that's something that's really undervalued in this space as well. I never asked Sean for a job. I never applied for a job, but I think I was front of mind for him because I built and maintained a relationship. I built and maintained relationships with other people in the space, with wrestlers. I never want to be a scoopster. That sounds terrible to me. I'm not built for that. But there is a general lack of that. I feel like even when I go into press scrums, for example, like some people will just walk down to the press room and not acknowledge the publicist who coordinated everything, or not follow up in emails or whatever. So I think treating human beings as human beings is something that is helpful in fostering the community that we have at Fightful, for sure, as well. And host chemistry and all those things. But again, speaking to that behind the scenes value, I think is more crucial almost for the off air part of it, for sure.
And yeah, so you're now working at Fightful. How did that opportunity ultimately present itself to you?
So I had started watching shows on Fightful like that March, and I just really liked the vibe there. I felt like the hosts all brought something different to the table. And I also became familiar with their content that was not on the main channel. Now it's called Fightful Overbook. Then it was called The Distraction. And there were a lot of things that were not wrestling related. We were playing just like silly games on Twitch. And I just liked that it seemed like cool people that also liked wrestling. And it was an environment that I got kind of more involved through social relationships. And then back when Sean had time, which was a long time ago, he would host prediction shows. And I always said that was like my dark match. If you are familiar with wrestling, that's kind of like the warm-up match that gets everybody ready, like a warm-up comedian almost for wrestling crowds. Because I had no intentions of working at Fightful full time. I didn't think it was a possibility for me, to be honest. But that prediction show, we just had a lot of fun, and the chemistry was good. And I guess Sean was misguided and thought I knew what I was talking about. No, just kidding. But that kind of evolved into just an opportunity opening up of the host that was with Sean for the SmackDown post show is our director of content on the journalism side, and he just got so oversaturated with what was happening there, and also in his personal life was it still is in a relationship with kids, and so the demands of doing like a Friday night post show just like weren't really jiving with what his current priorities were. And then when that opening came up, Sean had thought of me through I think a lot of our social interactions and us having a good chemistry on that prediction show. So it was like a little bit of an audition I didn't even know I was on.
Prior to that, were you balancing your own PR and freelance stuff, or was it just, okay, I'm quitting a job to take this job?
No, I was definitely doing I had my own business at that point. So it was fully immersed in my own business. And then at that point it was just the Friday night show. It expanded pretty quickly because one of the hosts there, Alex Pulowski, he has a show that he affectionately called Sour Graps. And it is loving hypercriticism of wrestling creative with a ton of love and room for growth as far as criticizing talent. It's a really, in my opinion, important priority to have. And he kind of felt like very Lewis Black-ish in a way to me, if you're familiar with him. But what I loved was all of the criticisms had so much justification. Like all of it felt like he was always offering alternatives for ways things could be better, but he didn't want to do it as a one-man show anymore. And I think he felt like it takes a specific personality type to kind of combat that or to complement it in a way. And I don't know if anybody in the Fightful rotation had that at that time. And when he saw me, he wanted to bring me onto the NXT show. And then he started doing bonus shows on Select that he was inviting me on for as well, which is the paid tier. So behind the paywall, there are alternative post shows, and that's how it kind of expanded so rapidly. So it started just as a Friday night commitment and then very, very quickly picked up. And then Ring of Honor came under the AEW umbrella. And because I'm such a nerd about that brand, people were like, Kate has to do that show with Reg, who was the co-host there at the time too. So it just kind of snowballed into its own thing. And then as I've gotten more immersed and trusted in the Fightful ecosystem, I'll say, I think I've taken on more responsibilities of making sure that the audio is distributed, making sure when there is a post show set up, the articles are set up. If I can't be the one doing that, that someone else is covering those responsibilities and things like that. And now I've kind of expanded into the sponsorship side as well because of my PR background. It's a very similar crossover of trying to sell value, essentially. So it's been great because I felt like I kind of maxed out where I was from a being able to do shows standpoint. I do 6 a week over there, knock on wood. So how do I build value and how do I continue to give myself value and get paid more, quite frankly, to do more work there is to kind of dive into what those strengths are and my background is. So I've been very thankful in that it's a very rewarding environment and there's a lot of trust in me and a lot of room to suggest things or take on new things, and that gets listened to by both Sean Rossap and Jimmy Van, who's kind of our money mark over there, as people would say, but really invested a lot in Fightful up front. So surrounding yourself with good people in a good environment is so much more important than talking about wrestling, 100%.
Now that those responsibilities have expanded to the 6 shows and then all of the behind the scenes work, how do you feel your skills as a podcaster and then a person behind the scenes have evolved since you've joined the team?
I think I think the thing that I'm most challenged on is still kind of finding my own voice in it. I think the things that have evolved are the maturity of my viewpoints and how I deliver them, kind of just having done so many reps of it, you kind of connect to marrying your perspective on things with your co-host. So I think I feel like my chemistry was always there, but I've gotten better at fostering how to pull more things out of people, like if I am in the host role. And also the realization that it's so much less about wrestling and so much more about people wanting to tune into people that they want to hear talk about wrestling. Like my Tuesday night show is so different from, whether you love it or hate it, it is so different from anything else on the internet. I can confidently say that. We do wrestling puns and we sing songs and impressions, and it's insane. It's completely unhinged. And I would never do that on my Friday night show for SmackDown. So I think like the cultivation of what those shows can be and the understanding that the most important thing you can do is deliver content that you would also want to listen to is paramount, because there's a lot of people talking about, I don't have to tell you, a lot of people talking about professional wrestling in this world. And so making it a place where people feel safe and are having fun and want to keep coming back is so much more important than the wrestling aspect, which made me nervous because I started watching in 2009, and there's a lot of people that have been watching this since 80s, 90s, whatever. So I was like, I don't know as much as a lot of people, but I'm always learning, and it's so much less about that is what I've really realized over time.
Would you say that's been the two sort of hardest areas in terms of finding your own unique voice and perspective on wrestling, and then overcoming that sort of nerves and knowledge base?
Definitely. I think the fact that with any art form, I take a good deal of pride, and it comes naturally to me to be authentically curious, like to be intellectually curious about stuff, um, to be seeking out more, because there's always more you can learn in wrestling, no matter how much you've been watching. And um, also, like, nobody wants to listen to a know-it-all, so I would say that's part of it. And yeah, like knowing that people's energy and hosts chemistry is probably maybe the biggest lesson that I've learned, because every show I do feels different. Even shows with the same hosts, like what I do with the same host on Tuesdays versus Mondays on Fightful Select, is like a wildly different show, which is kind of funny. So that's probably the biggest thing I've learned over the time is every show has their personality, and reaching that show's ceiling should be the priority instead of making it like your vision of how things should go.
Is that your top tip for people looking to get into wrestling and media as well, is to find your lane and differentiate yourself from everything else on the internet, because there is so much?
Yeah, I would say if you're creating your own content and your goal is to be your own content creator, the most important things are consistency and differentiation right now, because it is very oversaturated. So coming up with a unique idea is really important. There's a media personality named John Alba who's very good at that. Like he had a show with Eric Bischoff, which was one thing because he's very opinionated and John has his opinions, and that would be a little more combative. But he also did things like sit down with wrestlers' wives, and they had like a round table, and it was like the stories of the wrestlers' wives. And it was just such a fun thing because nobody else was doing that in the space. So differentiation and consistency, if you're creating your own content, is extremely important. If you're looking to be a hired gun somewhere, you got a relationship build. I was doing it unintentionally. I just thought Sean was really nice when we when we talked, and funny, and I liked our interactions, and I liked watching his shows. But like if you are trying to work in the space, do not assume everyone's always hiring. That's the big thing, is like, hey, I would love to work for you someday. Here's my resume stuff. Like I get that. I'm not Fightful HR. So don't assume everyone's hiring, but do foster relationships authentically and without like an end game, because if they can't hire you, they'll recommend you for someone else that can so often. And really above all, everything is like work with kind people that work hard, because there's just nothing, especially in wrestling media of all things. Like wrestling doesn't actually matter. Never mind wrestling media. As passionate as I am about it and as much as I love it, if it all went away tomorrow, we would all survive, right? There's nothing more important than doing your work with integrity, in my opinion. So if you're trying to get hired somewhere, finding good people that do good work and work hard, and building relationships is, I think, if you want to be a hired gun, what I would prioritize for sure.
Then that sort of feeds into the next question in terms of on the flip side, what are some of the sort of biggest mistakes and the pet peeves you see within wrestling media today?
Um, Ego is by far number one. Like the amount of people that just think their stuff is so important, and it's not, will get you absolutely nowhere. Like that drives me crazy. That you think you're better than someone because of a wrestling opinion. Absolutely bonkers. I'm lucky that at Fightful, I've never run into that with my co-hosts, and I think part of it is like that comes from the top. Like Sean has the biggest following and is the biggest scoopster in the game, and even he's like, it's wrestling, man. Like, chill out. Like his income is actually dependent on it. He has 40 employees, and even he's like, let's calm down. So I would say that, and I would also say, there's so many people that love to talk and not do anything. Like that sounds so harsh, but like the amount of people that will invite you on their show, tag you in tweets to promote their show, do all of this stuff, and I don't see clips of their show out there, and I see them recording once every 6 weeks. Like I record like once every 6 weeks on my own channel, and I don't like myself for that, but I also am doing what I want to do already, right? So the amount of people that I see putting out notes apps complaining about stuff and are just doing an iota of the work that they're portraying themselves as doing and talking about not getting anywhere drives me absolutely nuts. Like it absolutely, that kind of goes back to the it's not what you do between start and stop aspect of
Yep.
it. So ego and laziness, I think, are probably my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah, because it is such a crowded space, you do have to work hard. You can't just do one thing once a month and think, "Oh, that'll get me ahead."
Sure, and it is, especially when you're doing post shows or content that everybody else by nature of wrestling is doing. Um and also the, I hate saying it this way, but like there's also a certain lack of energy sometimes. And I don't mean like you have to come on with this, "Hey, how's it going?" Because that put on stuff is the worst. But
Mm.
like if you are not passionate about it or that passion isn't translating, like you have a very palpable energy, but it's a calm energy. And it's very nice to sit on a stream with you because it's very disarming, to be honest. Like it's very easy to have a conversation with you. But there's a lot of people that, why do I want to listen to you if you don't even want to talk about it, kind of thing.
Yep.
Like that it's an obligation or a chore of some sort. I'm like, well, I don't want to listen to someone who doesn't even want to be here. Why am I spending my time on that? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one for sure.
Yeah, I think regardless of if you really enjoyed something or really despise something, the passion, no matter what, always comes through. And you
Sure.
can tell if somebody's just there because, "Oh, I've got to put a show out today."
Yeah, exactly. And everybody has days like that. But if that's your default position, is that, yeah, it was good. That's one of
Yeah.
my biggest like on air phrases. Yeah, it was good. Oh, thank you. Like you've added so much value into my life by telling me that.
Cool, thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing I hate now a lot is the fake outrage and the tribalism. Like, it's so obvious, yet it's still one of the, like, dominant things we see, particularly on Twitter.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's like gross, where people will use wrestling tribalism to levy hate at each other. Um, I know people will go after my boss for being mouthy because he is mouthy, but he's mouthy when people harass his staff, which I appreciate, or it's never about wrestling opinions, right? It's always in defense of people that are being hated against for who they are, or people who are, whoa, my goodness, my dog just took my computer. Young lady, um, can you not choke yourself? Thank you. It's always, we'll start that again in case Jamie needs to edit it, you little scotch. The tribalism aspect is very frustrating because it's used to levy insults against people and make it extremely personal to kind of bait people into things or cultivate like rage culture. And it just seems so weird that people have these intense emotional reactions either authentically or inauthentically to try and get people pissed off about wrestling of all things. That culture is really gross. And I know my boss reacts to people who will use that to levy hatred or who are harassing his staff. So like he'll be very loud and outspoken about things, but it's never about wrestling opinions. When people get that intense about wrestling opinions, I question their mental wellness, genuinely. Like that's not me being like, they're crazy, what a Looney Tune. Like I genuinely am concerned for people who feel good levying and spewing hate at people who are giving a wrestling opinion. Like that absolutely blows my mind. The things that they'll fixate on. What's incredible about the tribalism is how convenient people create it to be. So if I say something nice about WWE, that means I hate it about AEW. If I say something substantively critical about WWE, that I hate WWE. Like there's absolutely no winning with how it gets framed.
Mhm.
And it's also, if you say something nice about a company one week, oh, well, 6 weeks ago you hated it. Did you change your mind? I'm like, well, no, they just put out a better episode this week. Like, yeah, things got better. I was complaining about how bad it was and then it got addressed or whatever. So,
And opinions change over time as well.
yeah, I would hope so. What a boring, undynamic world we would be living in if they didn't, right? So, the fake outrage drives me nuts, and the authentic outrage drives me to concern. For sure. And it's at the end of the day, it's all wrestling. So both companies, all promotions, independents, everybody's got great stuff going on, and they've got some stuff that isn't so great going on. And the more open-minded you're into it, the more you can ingest about it, the more sophisticated your opinion can become. I don't mean that in like a fancy way. I mean that in a intelligence way, in a learned way of you can distinguish between bad and good at a more mature level if you take in as much of it as you can, which is
Yep.
how I ended up talking about this 6 days a week, Jamie.
Yep. And like it's wrestling. Like, why are we taking things so seriously? Just there's that much out there. Find the stuff you like.
It's that simple. It's that
You don't,
simple of just don't watch what you don't like unless you get paid for it.
yeah. Yeah, like I personally have stopped watching WWE because I just didn't enjoy it. So I was like, I'm not gonna put myself through
What a
5, 6,
concept.
7 hours a week just to watch something I'm not really enjoying.
There are people that are completionists and they're sickos. And I understand that because I can be 2 songs into an album of a band that I like and hate the album, but I have to hear the rest of it. And I'll probably listen to it 4 times because I have to understand what they were thinking or whatever. So I get the idea of being a completionist, but on a weekly episodic basis to watch, I mean, both companies essentially are putting out at least 7 hours of television, 8 at AEW, right? They're 7 hours each, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, that's insane to dedicate 7 hours of your life to something you don't like. You would never do that if you were like, I hate Grey's Anatomy. You would not sit through a season in the course of 6 weeks or whatever to knock out an entire season of a show you don't like. It kind of blows my mind, especially to your point. There's so many alternatives right now. There's wrestling on basically every day on just TV and streaming, never mind getting into the independent scenes of things, right? So there's no excuse to not watch what you like, and there's no excuse to watch what you don't like. Like both of those things I feel like are true right now, and that's a freaking blessing. So take advantage of it.
And then to close out the media side of things, who are some people that you would recommend people follow as people that are doing the right thing in wrestling media?
That's a great question. I'll put my boss over if you can handle a significant amount of trolling when he gets scoops right. If you,
I love the Sean Ross victory laps.
it's a lot of home run gifts. It's a lot of 3-point swooshes when he gets a victory lap in on a big story. But he is doing things right, in my opinion, both from the perspective of the way that he treats people. I wouldn't work for him if I didn't feel that way. And also from a wrestling journalism standpoint. I'm very glad to never be a scoopster. He's really good at it. And he's really good about, if you're media literate, he is the best about the way that he delivers information, because he's also really good about delineating what is a report and what he is speculating on, or what his insights are, where I think some people can kind of mix those things up. I mentioned John Alba earlier. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I would recommend following him any day of the week. Andrew Zarian is another one that I think is great. Who else? Jamie Epps Media. He's wonderful.
Oh, okay. I'll do it right.
He's great. Yeah, I'm lucky in that I think a lot of my coworkers are doing really great stuff. If you're looking for rays of positivity, Robert D. Felice, Dude Felice is one of my favorites out there. But it kind of depends on what your vibe is. I would say it's more important to have your block list really, really calculated than almost who you're seeing, because it all filters in anyway. But yeah, I think Sean and John Alba and Andrew Zarian, if you're into like the news side of it, I think on the personality side of it, there's certainly a lot of flavors out there, and you just got to find out what you like as far as people's vibes go. Just avoid hot take machines, because there's so many out there. I did an interview with Wrestling Brain earlier, and those guys are great. They're just passionate about AEW and want to have fun. And similarly, they were like, we just stopped watching WWE because we weren't really liking it. So find your vibe and lock into that.
Yep. Yeah, no, for me, I'd recommend Todd Eastman from Wrestle Radio Australia. He's great as well.
Hell yeah.
And,
on the Australian side, you and Todd are like my guys.
And Josh from We Work Stiff for the New Japan storylines as well.
He's the best. I love Josh too. That is an oversight by me not to mention his name, but Josh is great. If you're into New Japan Pro Wrestling, he's fantastic. I would say too, trying to think of, there's some really great women in the space too. Lyric Wrestling is great for all Japanese wrestling. She's incredible. Kylie Wrestling, Kylie, who's on Fightful Overbooked, and just like, if you're just looking for someone who's extremely fun and silly, she's great too. So find your flavors for sure. But yeah, Todd and Josh are great shouts. I love both of them.
And then on the fandom side, over sort of the last year or so, you've become a major champion of Australian wrestling.
I have.
TMDK and Delta in particular.
Yes.
I had to wear my TMDK shirt for you today.
I love it. The green one too. I like it.
Yeah, the Coliseum special one when we had Zack Sabre.
Hell yeah. That was a great show. That's how I found out about Jessica Troy, was that show. Yep. I was unfamiliar with her. She was great.
How did you discover the Australian scene overall?
I had, well, largely, honestly, is the unreleased episodes that are still sitting on my laptop that I want to make a show at some point, but I just, I love independent wrestling in the States, but I'm so fascinated about wrestling around the world in general. I had heard a Chris Hero quote that really kind of set me down this journey of what are other scenes like. And what he did was summarize wrestling in a very specific way. You've already heard this because I asked you about it, but he had said that wrestling in the UK is like mental and physical chess. Wrestling in Japan is struggle through sport. American wrestling is morality play. And that lucha wrestling is acrobatics and pageantry. And I just loved how succinct that was. It made me wonder about scenes that I'm less familiar with. It made me want to dive into those scenes more through that lens. And I had heard great things about the Australian scene. I had seen great talent coming through there. Of course, Rhea Ripley, the Iconics. We have Shaz McKenzie here now that we stole. Slex, I knew. TMDK, I loved the work that they did on NXT as TM61. But I really, really fell in love with Zach's reign. And the realignment of TMDK under the New Japan umbrella through that TV title reign. I know it's his like catchword or whatever, but I think Shane Haste is genuinely hysterical. If you hear a single one of his commentary performances, you'll be laughing your ass off. But I love how much diversity there was within that stable. And it made me curious about what the rest of that scene looked like, seeing that Shane and Mikey and Robbie, all from the scene. And then the second you talk to anybody in Australia about Robbie Eagles, that's what I learned the most was if you mention that name, they're like, salt of the earth. He's the best dude in the whole wide world.
Except
So
if you're Tuckman.
unless you're Tuckman right now, not great for you. But even that, like from a non kayfabe or character perspective, like watching Robbie work heel in that match and the ending to it, I was like, God, this guy is so good. And then just kind of through even some Australian talent and seeing things peripherally, I saw that the women's scene was thriving and the tag scene was thriving. And I loved how even everything kind of seemed in the Australian scene. I had seen the velocities working. I had seen Delta was recommended to me through Todd, and she just blew my mind immediately. Just one of those talents that you see, and you're like, how is. I tweet it now all the time. I'm like, I just don't understand why people are not choosing to sign this person and make $1 million off them. It's so obvious that you can and that it's right there. And the more I talk to people about it, I learned so much of the diversity within the Australian scene of how just different in the US, we would call them territories, but essentially just major cities in Australia have kind of lead promotions that lean in certain directions, like some things that are more entertainment based, some things that are more purist based, some that are kind of an even mix. And I just loved how, me being who I am too, I love that like Jessica Troy and Delta are just two of the best wrestlers in the world in Australia who happen to be women. Love the Velocities, love Storm, love TMDK. Tuckman's all right. I met Matt Hayter when he was in America. He's someone that made me more curious about the Australian scene for sure too. But I love how there's really high quality of everything, and it made me just kind of want to dive in more. And I wish I had more hours and eyeballs and ears in a day.
And a slightly better time change.
Yeah, it is. It is. The time zone thing is tough. The time zone thing is tough because my watch longs would be at like 6 a.m. here. But I am passionate about and have been trying for a while to align plans of lending as much of my platform to other scenes as possible, because there's so much value, in my opinion, in seeing how other scenes function, and also so much talent that people just aren't aware exist. And some of that's Australia, some of that's what's RevPro is doing. Even being in America, the Canadian scene like is coming alive in a different way that I would love to be able to shed light on the talent and focus up there a little bit. So it's a really, really cool scene right now, and sometimes it gets so oversaturated that things can get lost, and I don't want that to happen, because I think there's so much value, and Australia's doing so much cool stuff right now that I don't want to get lost in the shuffle, because I think it's really cool and important.
My favorite part with the Australian scene is, yeah, we have a little bit of everything here at home, but then we've also got talents overseas trying to sort of carve a name for themselves over there. We've got a Julian Ward and Kaz Jordan up in Canada. They're doing great work. They've been on ROH a couple of times.
Yes, seen them a few times. Kaz was on, I think, at least not that long ago, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, about a week or two ago. Charlie Evans is about to head back over to England, so she'll be doing some great work over there. I know a couple of guys are heading over to. Scott Green is heading over to the UK as well very shortly.
Very cool.
Our guys are kind of taking over all over the place. Obviously, Robbie in Japan. Lena Cross was in Japan as well.
Yes, we had Lena here in the States for a little bit too.
She's back there at the moment, currently.
Oh, cool. Go see her sometime.
And Xena is one of the trios champs in Stardom at the moment as well. So there is Aussies everywhere. And like I think our scene is very underrated. It's one of those ones where people watch and go, oh, wow, all of these people are ready to sign. Why haven't people like Delta been signed?
Yeah, I was kind of bummed because I felt like I had gotten into the Australian scene, to your point, like middle of last year. And when Elimination Chamber was coming around and there were going to be Australian tryouts, I was like, oh, I can, like, if I can name talent that should be signed, certainly they're going to be able to see it. And I didn't like hear of any names coming out of there yet. So I am hoping that it's a matter of unannounced or second looks or whatever, because there are people that are ripe for the picking for sure. And again, women's talent, men's talent. The Velocities are probably the best unsigned tag team in the world that aren't like maybe in the GYV conversation or whatever that's looking like. Like the Velocities not being snatched up is downright silly. So it's certainly not a lack of ability. It's I think a lack of awareness and some very saturated rosters in the US right now. to be frank, like very very saturated rosters in the wrestling world right now. But there are some people that just need the switch flipped, and that Aussie scene is going to be on American television in no time, because we've already seen it with Grayson Waller and Rhea and the Iconics and so many. I was going through the list like not that long ago when I was having this conversation with someone else, and there's just so many. So so many that are over here, but still a lot of work to do for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and I think with Delta's performances recently, you mentioned she had the tryout. She recently wrestled Jordan Grace for the Knockouts World Titles as well. I looked at that and I was like, surely there's a bidding war for her right now.
There should be. There should be. It would be silly if there wasn't, because she's someone like, I love Jessica. I think she's incredible, and she's my favorite style of wrestling in a woman, which we don't always see. And she, I think, between the ropes is a fantastic storyteller. And she has kind of this really fun hippie air about her to me that doesn't always come alive with more technical sides. And I think there's this really unique combination of attributes. And I think you learn that about her as you go along her wrestling a little bit. Delta is someone that as soon as she walks through the curtain, you're like, that's a star. Like immediately. When Todd sent me her, it was just a reel or whatever. I was 10 seconds into it and I was like, I'm sold. I'm sold on this woman already. And it's downright silly. I can't believe WWE hasn't seen like, well, we made $1 trillion with Rhea Ripley. This person is coming from that same scene. She also, not identical ring style by any means, but like is a hard hitting,
very similar
woman.
presence.
Yeah, like how would you not go and get that? But we'll see. I feel like American women's wrestling is on an upswing again. Always work to be done, but AEW's made some major improvements in the past few months. WWE has gone back and forth, I think, with Vince and Triple H. Vince and Triple H being in and out of power. But there are some Australian women and men's talent. I don't mean to leave that scene out. I just get so excited about women's wrestling that are. It's certainly not a lack of ability that's keeping them off TV. Once those opportunities come, they're going to take advantage of them and blow the world away. I don't doubt it.
Yep. Being in the building for the Her show, and as soon as Delta walked out, I went, okay, her presence and presentation, you don't need to change anything. You can just put that on TV right now.
Copy and paste, legit. And you would sell a cajillion t-shirts because she's so cool. I want to be her when I grow up.
So then a fun little closing question playing off that. If you were to start a wrestling promotion, who would be the top 5 wrestlers you'd build your roster around?
God, that are unsigned right now?
Or signed, either way. Your
or
choice.
Signed. Oh God.
CM Punk still on that list?
Well, no, because I would, if I'm starting a wrestling promotion, I would need them to not be injured. And I would also prefer that they hadn't punched anybody in the head in the past. Eddie Kingston. I have to say Zach, because that's just me voting with my heart. And I think he does some of the best work in the world. Eddie Kingston, Zack Sabre Jr., Bryan Danielson, undoubtedly. Trying to think of my gals in there, but that leaves no tag teams. This is a tough question. Can I take a tag team as one act?
Yes.
Okay. We'll do FTR then and Athena. Feels good.
Okay. That's a solid.
That feels pretty good.
It's a solid top 5.
It is. And it's only a lack of familiarity with Delta that I don't just take her off the board immediately. I need to do more research on Delta myself.
I would love to see Delta and Athena at some point on ROH if we can get Delta a visa and she's not currently signed.
Yeah. Like, fingers crossed that that could happen, but also fingers crossed that if it doesn't happen, it's because she signed somewhere else because she rules.
Yep. Alrighty. So, where is the best place for people to support you and track your creative journey moving forward?
Sure, you can find me at Miss Kate Fabe on social media. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find me there as long as TikTok's alive in the US, I guess. And you can
Oh yeah.
also catch me. Yeah, we just passed a law, so we'll see how that goes. We got 9 months to figure it out. But you can also catch me all over Fightful. I do Fightful post shows Mondays on Fightful Select and Saturdays doing Raw and Collision. And then Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on the main channel is doing NXT, ROH, and SmackDown. And Wednesdays, I go back home to where I started this all at the Mark Order podcast, where we talk all things All Elite after AEW. So I'm talking on everybody else's platforms
Great.
all the time.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and good luck with everything, and try not to burn out.
I will do my. It's funny because there used to be a time where like a 5-show week was exhausting, but you like build up a little bit of a stamina to it. I'm like immune now, where it's weirder if it's not a part of my days, which is kind of fun. So I'll take it.
Kind of like the Brian Danielson of podcasting.
That's it.
A
Look,
20-minute match feels way too short now.
yeah, exactly. I will take that compliment. I'm gonna clip that out of context and just be like, they think I'm the best one to ever do it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jamie.